Thank you so much for joining us today for From the Field. We are talking with Blake Matthews and Jared Cook from the Mini-Cassia area about efforts that they have implemented on Blake's farm that relate directly to the Climate Smart grant that the University of Idaho received earlier last year, I guess. Just to remind you, it was about $55 million for innovative agriculture and market programs. And Blake received a portion of that grant for the work that he's been doing on his farm. So I'll go ahead and let Blake and Jared introduce themselves. But before I do that, I just want to remind you that you are free to ask questions at any time. Please do ask questions. You can do that either by using the reactions button at the bottom of your screen to just raise your hand. You can type it into the chat. Also at the bottom of your screen, if you follow my finger, that's where they are on my screen. I don't know if that's where they are on yours. Or you can just unmute your microphone and we'll make sure that we'll see that and make sure that you have a chance to ask your question. So Blake, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and then we'll jump to Jared and then jump into the practical applications that you've been employing for the past several years on your farm.
Okay. No, absolutely. Thank you, Brittany. So my name is Blake Matthews. I farm with my dad and my brother, as well as cattle ranch, and we have a feedlot in Oakley, so just south of Burley, about 20 miles. This spring will be 20 years that I've been back on the farm full time. I went to Utah State, graduated with a ag machinery technology degree, so diesel mechanics, and then came back to the farm after serving a mission for my church. I've been working with Jared for going on about 14 years now. He works with Rocky Mountain Ag. He'll introduce himself here in a little bit. And kind of through this, we've kind of bucked the system a little bit, if you will, and kind of went against the status quo on a lot of our crops. So on our farm, we grow potatoes, sugar beets, corn, wheat, malt, barley, and alfalfa. Like I said, as well as a mother cow herd, and then about a 6,000 head feedlot that we both feed both our own cattle as well as custom feed for others. So some of our crops are raised to go into the feedlot as well as sell, to whoever it may be, the sugar beets, potatoes, and that kind of stuff. I guess that enough background, I guess, what you were thinking, Brittany, or do you want a little more?
Yeah, that's great. Jared, if you just want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll talk about what those practical applications actually look like.
Okay, Brittany, this should take all of about 3 seconds. I'm Jared Cook. I was born and raised in southern Idaho, grew up just outside of Asequa, little town outside of Rupert, which is little town outside of Burley, for some of the people that might be in the northern part of the state. But anyway, I've been in the agronomy world. I think this is year 17. I kind of lose track now, but graduated from BYU Idaho back in 07 or 08, can't remember, with a bachelor's degree in soil science and agronomy. I grew up on a family farm, but closest avenue for myself to get back into the ag game was through the agronomy route. And so that's the path I took, and been fortunate to meet great people like Blake and be able to form just rock solid relationships and work hand in hand with farmers to help guide and direct for high quality yield, high quality crops, and return on investment. So that's what I do, and just happy to be here. So appreciate the invite, Brittany. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time. All right, Blake. So you've been back on the farm for about 20 years. And this grant is new, but the practices really aren't new for you, right? How long have you been using these, I don't know what to call them, climate smart applications on your farm?
So we'll use the buzzword. Both Jared and I absolutely hate it, but regenerative practices. There's got to be a better word out there than that. But we'll go with what is common. So we actually kind of started some of these practices as long ago as about 12 years ago. And then every year we've just gradually worked more and more into our system to kind of where we're at now. And just as a little clarification, so the grant on the IAMP grant, there actually hasn't been, they aren't giving any money out yet on the grant. We're actually the demo farm for the grant in Southern Idaho. And so that's where we're working with. And then when the grant does open up, we will apply for some of the things that we want to try with in the future. And so that's kind of where the grant's at. But yeah, I mean, we've kind of worked our way anywhere from strip till to minimum till to we've cut out a lot of fungicides, insecticides, fumigation in potatoes, dropped a lot of things out on our small grains, interseeding in our small grains. So yeah, we're doing a lot of kind of like I started the first unstatus quo things on our farm. And, it's something that Jared and I have worked with hand in hand through the years and kind of gotten to where we're at now.
What was the inspiration for that? I mean, what made you think we have to do something different here, or we should try these different approaches?
Well, kind of the driver that initially started it was I got tired of going to meetings where, the universities or the chemical companies, the next fungicide was going to save the farm. And it was going to put all this money in your pocket. You don't have to do anything different. It's kind of like weight loss. You can just keep doing the same thing and you're going to lose weight. And I got tired of that. That was the future. Farming had gotten not necessarily boring, but I mean, there was no excitement to it. This is what we did last year. We're going to do the same thing this year, but we're going to tweak this one little chemical. The fun had gone out of it. You kind of peaked out and everything was like, well, this is as good as it's going to get. And it just, I knew there had to be something more. And that's when I'd kind of come in contact with Jared and we talked it out a little bit. He kind of had the same theory and he had some ideas that we started with, and then we went down the rabbit hole from there.
Where did you start? I know for a lot of people, and if I were in this situation, that would be the biggest hurdle is I don't know where to start. I know I want to do different things, but I'm not sure how to get that ball rolling. So did you just draw a number out of a hat or jump in? What made you start where you started, and how did you decide to do that?
So initially where we kind of started down this path was actually on sugar beets. It was shortly after the Roundup Ready sugar beets had come out, and in any Roundup Ready crop, when you spray them with glyphosate, they have a little bit of a lag time where that plant has to metabolize that chemistry. And so there's typically about a 10 to 12 day window that those plants don't really do anything because they're trying to work through that chemistry through their system. And so we wanted to see if there was something that we could add when we sprayed the Roundup to be able to make that plant speed that process up. And so that was kind of initially where we started. And then that year also we had a grain corn crop that we needed to follow potatoes with. And so we had a lot of residue that was there, and we needed to be able to get that residue to disappear so that we could get the potatoes in. And so that was our first experience with biologicals. And kind of from there, we just started seeing the results from some of these products that we were using and what it did for our overall soil health. And so then we began asking questions. Okay, can we do this? Can we start trimming out fungicides? Do we really need to use insecticides if we have our soil healthy enough, which then ergo makes our plant healthy enough? Are we using the right nutrients? Are we getting the right samples? And so it kind of opened a can of worms that we haven't been able to put the lid on, but we haven't really wanted to put the lid back on. And you know, and so we are very data driven. Jared and I, we do a lot of sampling, soil samples, plant samples. So you can't fix something that you don't accurately understand. And so that's kind of driven us to know more. We both, our wives get mad at us because we're texting at like 10:30 at night because we're like, look at these roots, you know, and it's not something that typically two guys are texting about at 10:30 at night, but we kind of have a little bit of a different relationship, if you will. But and so it's fun, and it's putting excitement back in farming.
So you don't farm alone. You farm with your dad and your brother. You said that at the beginning. Was it a hard sell to get them on board with trying these new things, or was that a pretty easy jump to convince them?
So my brother, it was easy because he kind of takes care of the cattle in the feedlot. So as long as he got the feed he needed, he wasn't too worried about it. My dad, yeah, there was some arm wrestling matches, and some days there still are arm wrestling matches to be had over some of the different things that we're playing with and trying. But I mean, overall, we've seen the progress in the farm, and you can't not see the difference that it's making. And granted, you know, we've stubbed our toes plenty, tripped, fell on our face, and you know, had some issues with some of the stuff we've done. We've made plenty of mistakes, but overall, I think we've been quite successful at it.
So for both of you, I want to know, what has surprised you both ways? What has surprised you that has worked, and what has surprised you that you thought would work and didn't?
I'll let you go first, Jared.
Yeah, I was gonna say Brittany's bringing the heat today. These are magical questions. Yeah, I want to comment on one thing before I answer that, Brittany. What Blake just said about stubbing our toes and the mistakes we've made. That's kind of the purpose of Blake's establishment with IAMP and as a demonstration farm. It's our objective to work with the IAMP group, Nature Conservancy and them, to help other people learn what we did wrong, what we did to change it, so not everybody has to make the same exact mistakes we did. That's really one of the main focal points of Blake's involvement on that demo farm. So just to lay that out, we're very willing to share our triumphs and our failures. And so, yeah, if we can prevent other people from making the same mistakes, that's a home run for us. But anyway, back to your question. I kind of want to deflect and not answer that question, Brittany. But I think what's surprised me the most is, I'll tell you this, I got my hands on a book that was written in the late 60s, and it was managing plant diseases with macro and micronutrients is the name of the book. That book's a compilation of about 15 or 18 different case studies of where diseases were known, and the strategy deployed was to manage those diseases with mineral nutrition. No fungicides, no insecticides. This was managing with phosphorus, copper, zinc, iron, potassium. And so it was fun to be able to read those early case studies from that book, and then start implementing some of those same principles on Blake's farm and see it really work. That was truly inspiring to know that a generation before us, they knew these things. And now maybe to a slight degree, we're starting to bring them back into more popularity. And so that's been inspiring from my point of view. Back to you, Blake.
Right.
Thanks. If we were having this conversation 12, 15 years ago, and you were telling me I'd be sitting here telling you this story, I'd tell you were full of it. Because I had a little bit of agronomic background, very little, but that the status quo, and I hate to referring back to the status quo all the time, but just you know, the universities, the way they teach and everything else is this way, is the old way, I guess, if you will. But to, you know, that we've been able to eliminate fungicides, insecticides, and fungicides on corn, sugar beets, wheat, malt barley, and potatoes, and have done it for 7 years now. That is probably what has surprised me the most, and we can consistently do it year in and year out.
Have you seen a difference in your yields?
So most years, yes. I mean, we definitely haven't seen a decrease. I think we've seen the quality increase. You know, our test weights, like on our small grains, have increased quite a bit. Protein's gone up on our wheat. The yields have increased. Not huge amounts, but the cool part is, though, is our ROI, our investment in that crop is decreased, and so in theory, our profit on that crop is increased because we have way less input into it.
So inputs have decreased, quality has improved, yields have not decreased.
Yes.
That's a pretty successful story.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there were some years that we did lose some yield because of some of the toe stubbings that we took, but now, you know, that we know more, I guess, if you will, of what we're doing. You know, we've been able to consistently improve and you know, maintain or improve those yields.
Blake, Blake and Jared, I know you've been working together for several years on this. I'm curious to know if there's something you see that's coming or that you're working on. Excuse me, I know this is a continual work in progress, but if you see something big and extravagant that's going to make this even more successful and more effective for farmers.
I mean, I guess the big and extravagant thing that I worry about is actually, you know, we've seen it a little bit in that some of these chemistries that the mainstream is very dependent upon are getting taken away. You know, I don't know how long it's going to be before in potatoes that you're not going to be able to fumigate, and that's a huge deal. I mean, you know, for instance, Lore's ban, we lost that for a couple of years. It's come back, but for how long? You know, so I mean, eventually a lot of this stuff I think is going to get taken away that a lot of guys depend upon, and I don't know that they know how to function without it. And so they're gonna get forced to change or not farm because they don't have a choice, I think is what I'm afraid of, that's going to force more people to this than anything.
Jared, what do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree with Blake. It's well said. My biggest fear is you're always one regulation away from losing tools. You know, and it's not like Blake and I are anti-pesticide, insecticide, fungicide, but you know, we want to use them as tools rather than this prophylactic treatment all the time. And so, but going back to the one regulation away, man, if you're dependent on a product for an outcome and you don't have that product anymore, that's risk. And so part of this has just been a strategy to learn a different approach, learn a different way. And so it puts us in control, you know, because I think end of the day, we manage these issues with mineral nutrition. I always believe there will be an abundance of mineral nutrition available to producers, but when it comes to very technical, tech grade active ingredient chemistries, who knows? Who knows what the regulations might do? And so that's been some of the motivation for myself working with Blake is how do we create alternatives that are sustainable, cost effective, and agronomically effective? So anyway, similar to what Blake said, maybe a few different words.
Will the dollars from this grant allow you the ability to look into these issues and concerns?
Yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of these things that we're talking about, I mean, are stuff that we're already doing. We are looking at some different things that, with the IAMP grant that we're able to maybe experiment with or try a little bit differently, to see whether we can prove them out or not. And so, yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the point of the grant is for somebody, for instance, like on a wheat crop, if they want to transition into no-till, this money can help them not have it be quite so much of a sting, whether they've got to, buy a new drill or, whatever it may be, however they want to transition into this. But that's kind of the point of the IAMP grant, is to help people kind of take a little bit of the edge off of that first step to get into some new practices on their farms.
What benefits have you seen from no-till?
So I actually don't have any no-till on my farm.
Do you do minimum?
Yes, we do minimum till as well as strip till in the row crops. The thing that we have seen is, and it's not necessarily because of it, because like the minimum till and the strip till, we've kind of come into later in our journey, if you will. And so we kind of, on the front end, we started managing more for overall soil health and plant health. And then the strip till, minimum till were just logical steps that we took to continue on improving that soil health, if you will. And so a lot of the things that we're doing, we actually came about them backwards from what most people did, on a normal journey, I guess, to get to where we're at. And so, we didn't, like Jared said, we didn't set out to try and eliminate insecticides, fungicides, and fumigants, but it became, once we got the soil healthy enough, we realized, hey, we probably don't need these. Let's see if we can step away from them. And so, and like Jared said, not that we, despise them or anything, but if we don't need them, we don't want to have to use them. So.
Blake and Jared, I know you mentioned a lot of your findings. You're doing a lot of data testing. And I think I read that, Blake, you are sharing a lot of that information through social media. Are you getting any positive feedback, questions from farmers, how they can implement these different applications, stuff like that, from your testing and results and posting that for others to see?
So we have in the past shared quite a bit of videos in that, and really kind of surprising, we didn't get a whole lot of traction out of them. We'll share a few pictures, a few videos every now and then. We've had a few comments on them. With the IAMP grant, we actually just had a field day this week, and we had a kind of a kickoff meeting in March. And surprising but not surprising, there wasn't a whole lot of farmer turnout to them, and hasn't been a whole lot of farmer comment on the social media stuff. It's, I don't know, the farmer mentality is hard to break through. My neighbor's not going to ask me what I'm doing, and I think of myself still as kind of in the younger end of the farmer group, if you will. And so, I'm the one that doesn't know that much. And so I think a lot more people will actually reach out to Jared and talk to him about stuff, versus on my end of it.
Jared, what kind of questions are you getting, or what kind of feedback?
Ryan, you're saying on the social media and that?
Yeah, just from what you've posted as far as results and data.
Well, I think what it's done, it's united us with other like-minded individuals. And so consequently, as a result, we've got connections all across the country with individuals who are doing similar things or have similar desires and passions, right? And so that's been really cool to be able to kind of formulate a new network of out of the box thinkers that we can bounce ideas off of. And so that's been a huge value. As far as driving massive opportunities from social media, no, that hasn't happened. It's just, I think just a lot of tire kickers. Oh, that's cool. You know, you see something cool on social media. Oh, you give it a thumbs up and walk on. You don't give it two ounces of thought past that. And so anyway, that's what I think you guys are doing. This is awesome platform here to share information, share ideas. I think this is phenomenal what you guys are up to here. So I compliment you there.
Corey, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to know some specifics, like what do you find in interseeding works? Are you taking that to harvest, or is it like something you're using for nitrogen benefit and then killing it out? Kind of thoughts on that. What else you're doing, like specifically to minimize insecticides and fungicides? Is any other tricks besides rotation and those sort of things, or just some more specifics?
Corey, it's your lucky day, buddy. We got a few pictures with your name on them. So I'll try sharing my screen. If it fails, Ryan's got the good backup plan, but we've got a few things you might like, Corey.
While
There
you're
you go.
pulling that, I'll comment. I hate the word regenerative too. I don't think it gives enough respect to those that came before us. They did the best they had with what they or best they could with what they had at the time. I'm sure 50 years from now somebody will call us idiots too for what we're doing. So anyway, props to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Blake, you wanna give the rundown on this?
Yeah, so this is a soft white winter wheat that we put down 3 pounds of Ecotil radish. We just had it blended with the seed and then just drilled it in with it. This picture is taken about it's about 3 weeks after we planted. So you can see the radish coming there. And then if you want to kick on to your next one, Jared.
Yeah, and I might add this particular field is just east of Oakley and about 15 miles south of Burley. And so there's really good slope, a lot of runoff and erosion issues. I'm sure Blake is probably going to get there, but anyway, back to you, man.
Yeah, and so that was part of the reason why we wanted to do this. This is actually on a linear pivot. And like Jared said, this field has a lot of slope to it. And so what we wanted to try with the radish is to see if A, would it work? And B, could we get a better water infiltration because of it? And what would we see? You know, would that synergy between the two do something for us? What would it do? This picture on the right, when we seeded this, I considerately forgot to tell my dad that we were doing it. And so he called me up with this picture on the right and said, "What in the world's going on with this wheat? There's all kinds of other stuff." I said, "Oh, we interseeded some radish in with it." So he's like, "Oh, okay, we're good," And so it was kind of funny. So like I say, these pictures here a couple weeks later, and then I think the next picture, is in the spring. Well, so the one on the left, the radish there, that was late fall when we did that, and then some of those, some winter killed and some survived through. Then post herbicide though, we got a good kill on them, and that wasn't very long after we sprayed, and we pretty well got them cleaned out. But we can still find those root channels in that field from those radishes, which was really what we were after. It'll be interesting to see how the yield turns out there. But it's something that we're probably going to experiment with more this year. Possibly putting a couple different things in with it, and then also using it on our barley. So,
Corey, I'd say that out of the majority of those radishes that we had, probably the average diameter was probably about 3/4 of an inch. I think the one I've highlighted here is probably on the bigger side. It's about 1.5 inches. But interesting enough, that radish there, it survived well through the winter. Theoretically, it should have died. But a lot of these overwintered well. The radishes that were 1/2 inch in diameter, or let's say less than 3/4 of an inch, they winter killed. They went away. And it was interesting, you could go find those holes, those 3/4 inch holes or 1/2 inch holes everywhere a radish was. And I think that's probably the main effect for the reduced runoff and improved water infiltration we're seeing today in that particular field. And so,
Well, and that field, you know, if you're familiar with a linear, it's just glorified wheel line. But that field is a very long field, and so it takes a long time for us to get to the bottom and then get back up to the top. And usually, especially like right now, when we've hit these 90-degree temperatures, we're just about burning the top end by the time we get back up there with the water. And our, you know, the soil moisture is held so much better this year than it has in past years. And I've got to attribute a lot to this interseeding with the radish. And so I think, you know, a dry farm deal, I think it would be an interesting experiment to have on a dry farm and see how that works, especially in a fall seeded crop.
Yeah, anybody that knows me, I'm a huge proponent of rotations, and the part I struggle with, or where the government definitely wants this direction, but I always wonder what we're gaining there over a taproot crop like a canola or an oil seed or something. I don't know if we need to do more research in that to try and distinguish if one's better than the other, or things like that. That's what I'm constantly trying to figure out. What's the best answer? The management side of me likes monocropping because I can control it to some extent. I start mixing broadleafs and grasses, and then all my control goes away. And maybe that's back to your early point. Maybe I'm too reliant on herbicides or things like that. But that's kind of part of farming too, is I like to try and control things that I can't control, I guess. But anyway, it's very interesting stuff.
you know, and Corey,
Well,
to your point, Corey, you know, it was painful to see that out there. We're in the same mindset. It's like, what in the world are we doing? And I was nervous as heck that the herbicide in the spring wouldn't control it. You know, it's hard to kill some of these big taproot type crops. And anyway, as luck had it, or just our strategy, herbicide wiped it out very effectively. And I don't think you'd be hard pressed to find a single radish that came through it. And so we're very optimistic about this particular strategy being very easy to manage.
No, absolutely. That was what I was going to say. You know, that is one thing we have not been able to get away from yet is the herbicides. You know, we've tried some different things. We're still trying some different things to see what we can or can't do. But that is one thing that we have not been able to figure out how to kick yet. And that was part of the reason why we went with the radish, is because we figured that with the, you know, in our herbicide on our small grains, you know, we're usually have a tank mix of a couple different things, and all of them were good on a radish. And so we figured that we should be fairly safe, but we've done a lot of things on a should before that haven't worked out. So, but yeah, knock on wood, this one worked out. And like I say, it's something that we're definitely going to pursue and try on more acres this year.
I wish Jamie's in the house. Maybe she can find it. I rented a piece of ground in like 2010 from a guy from the Portland area, and part of the requirement for renting that, I read a book by a Japanese guy written in the 1950s that was really dove into this, and that's a long time ago now. I wish I could remember what that book was called, but that's led me. My thought process there is: have you thought about trying some sort of pulse or legume or a clover or something that would have nitrogen benefit in that? I'm constantly looking, if I'm going to spend the money, you know, what benefit can I gain from it to, you know, that's tangible. So don't get me wrong. I know infiltration is super important, and yes, that's tangible, just hard to quantify.
Right. Absolutely. So one thing that we ran into, not in the small grains, but in some of our other crops, like for instance, we had following our malt barley, we were going into sugar beets. And so we planted an 8-way cover crop mix in there to be able to put that in and then come in and strip till it in the spring. And one thing we ran into, so that mix had a couple different types of radish and mustard, some turnips, rutabaga, clover. What else am I missing, Jared?
I think you got most of them.
But so we had a great stand to all of them except for the clover. And all we can figure is that the clover got put in too deep. And so I think that's one thing that a guy might have a problem with in trying to interseed the clover, unless a guy's going to figure out how to just blow it on over the top, that a guy might fight with on like on, you know, putting it in with your wheat or barley. I'm with you. I think it would be a great thing, you know, to get some sort of a legume in there to be able to get some nitrogen fixing and that. But that's one toe stubbing that we have had that, you know, because we love clover, but getting it in there, we've got to figure out a little bit better way to do it.
So you,
Oh,
oh, go ahead, Corey.
I just the fungicide, insecticide one. What's any tips for the rest of us to think about trying, or?
So
Oh, boy.
I'll give the farmer side of it, and then Jared can give you the technical side of it. The biggest thing that we found is since we've gone to saturation paste, soil sampling, and sap sampling on the plants, to where we can actually dial in really what is in the soil, what we need to apply for that crop, and then where the crop is, we've seen our overall soil health and plant health increase. And because of that, along with a couple other nutritional products that we use that Jared will talk about, with that, we've been able to we've been able to get away from the insecticides and fungicides.
Yeah, the thing I'll add, guys, is I think nitrogen, particularly nitrate and ammonium. I mean, there's 3 forms of nitrogen that exist in the plant. You got nitrate, ammonium, and total N. The ultimate goal is to take ammonium and nitrate and convert those into total N for the plant. That's what the plant uses as its horsepower. It's in the presence of excess nitrate and excess ammonium that causes pest and disease issues. And we found that as we've navigated to sap testing, because I mean, primarily the reason sap testing is the only testing method, plant testing method, that measures all 3 forms of nitrogen in the plant. If you run a tissue test, you get nitrate, total N, but you don't get ammonium. If you run the petiole, you get nitrate and possibly total N, but no ammonium. And so sap testing allowed us to understand all 3 forms and their functional dynamics of how they work in the plant. And we found that as we started to eliminate nitrate, free nitrate and ammonium in the leaf tissue and convert to a higher total N percentage, disease naturally went away. Insect pressure naturally went away. And so we also got a good handle on how our soils were releasing through mineralization nitrogen. Because a lot of times through mineralization, ammonium shows up in the plant before nitrate. And so knowing that gave us an upper hand on how to basically manage all these issues. And so I would say that one piece alone has helped us be successful in the realm of fungicide and insecticide management.
That's really interesting to me because my whole farming career, I've noticed insect pressure increases dramatically when a crop's stressed. And I always assumed maybe the sugars were more concentrated, but I guess that theory still fits. When a crop's stressed, you're going to have excess nitrogen in the plant. Is that, you think, the reason why that is then?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, because you think about this, Corey, if your soil or plant testing and all of a sudden you have a high load of free ammonium in the leaf, that's dysfunctional ammonium. It shouldn't be there. Ammonium should be converting to total N at the root tip. The fact that it's in the leaf is indicator that the plant's saying, all right, I got too much ammonium in the system. I'm moving it to my leaf so I can be closer proximity to photosynthate, you know, sugars, carbohydrates, minerals. And so the plant will partition ammonium into that new growth just to try to process it out into terms of total N. And so that's dysfunctional ammonium if it's there in a free form in the plant leaf. Nitrate, on the other hand, it's supposed to be accumulated in the leaf. That's where it's designed to go. But you got to have adequate sugars. You got to have adequate carbon, sulfur, and micronutrients if you expect nitrate to become total N. And so you're very accurate. Yeah, stress, typically drought stress in your situation, dude, you lose the uptake of minerals, and now all of a sudden the plant can't do what it's designed to do in terms of assimilating nitrogen into total N. So this is a nitrogen assimilation issue. And I think that's what, if Blake and I have been successful with anything, it's understanding nitrogen assimilation.
Well, and just to add to that too, within that nitrogen assimilation cycle, it's everything else that you need to have to assimilate that nitrogen. Like the micros that Jared talked about: iron, copper, sulfur, boron, zinc. How important those have become. So we've actually on every crop on our farm, we have actually been able to pull back the N. We're increasing our other nutrients according to what the soil samples and sap samples show, and because of that, our nitrogen efficiency is increased. So we've backed our nitrogen off, but our plants are performing better on it. And then when you hit those stress times, the plant's able to still push through it better because it's not loaded so high on the nitrogen. And I think that the common mentality as farmers is, well, if there's a problem, just put more N on it, it'll solve it. And that is actually the last thing we need to be doing.
No, good stuff. Thank you.
Water has been in the news a lot. Water is always an issue in Idaho. You irrigate, Blake, because you live in the desert. And some of these practices that you've put into place, like the radishes, some of the other things, have reduced the amount of water that you've had to use, or they've preserved the soil moisture. Are you planning to do any additional experimentation so that you can use less water? Or what's next? Like, what's the next trial?
So I'll give a little bit of more background, I guess, on our water use efficiency that we've seen on our farm and what we've been able to do to kind of decrease water use. A lot of this started when we really started pushing biology and biological products on our farm. And actually, when we were comparing fumigated to non-fumigated ground in potatoes, was really where it started. We had two rows side by side. One row was fumigated, one row wasn't. And you could feel in the dirt that the non-fumigated row was wetter, physically wetter than the fumigated row was 3 feet away. And so that got us thinking that, okay, and since then we've been able to prove it out, but the more biology that we can have in the soil, the more diversity, which increases the organic matter, which increases the flocculation in the soil, the more moisture it will hold. And so, potatoes and that, we've probably knocked, I don't know, just taking a guess, 3 to 4 inches of water out of our potato crops, in the past 10 years. Grain, I would guess somewhere in the 4 range. I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, Jared. Then the other thing that we've seen too, so as we've progressed and we've gone to the strip till and the minimum till, we're not disturbing that soil structure. It's able to stay there. It stays, structured and flocculated. The stratification stays there, and it's able to hold the moisture better and hold that through on the crop. And so as far as going forward with water efficiency, we're continually improving it. Just like this covered the radish in the wheat, that's something that we're going to continue to try and do. Whether we go into a couple more species in there, we're going to push it into trying it in the barley this next year as well, and and see and try and do some of this intercropping to where that you don't have the conflict, I guess, if you will, between the intercrops. Because ultimately we still got to pay the bills with a cash crop, and so we can't do anything to harm that cash crop or compete against it. whether it be nutritional or sunlight or whatever. And so we have to be very cognitive of what we're intermixing with these things, that they don't begin to harm or cause affliction to the cash crop. And so, I mean, like I say, we're really looking at this intercropping now and seeing what we can and can't do, what we can get away with or not, and what improvements it can make to, you know, overall soil health as well as water infiltration. So then, you know, hopefully we can back off even more on the water, because I mean, this water deal is not just an Eastern Idaho deal. It's the whole state. We have a finite amount of water and we've all got a straw in it. And we all have to be judicious about our water usage and what we're doing with it, and try and be better about it.
That's the truth. All right. Well, thank you again so much for joining us, Jared and Blake. Thank you all who logged on today and for your questions and thoughts, Corey. If you want to share this episode with a friend or a neighbor, or if you want to go back to watch it again to reference it, you can. We have recorded it. We'll post it to our YouTube channel. We'll also post it to our podcast on any platform that wherever you like to get your podcasts. You can search for Idaho Wheat and find this episode. Or to make it really easy for you, you can go to idahowheat.org, find the video of it or the audio, the podcast of it, and then you can refer back to it or share freely. It will live there forever. And we will see you for our next From the Field. Thank you so much, Jared and Blake.
Welcome. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. One last plug, Brittany.
Oh yeah.
It'll
Please.
either be the last week of July or first week of August. We're gonna have one more field day out at our farm for the IAMP grant. So just we would encourage everybody that's interested in anything regenerative. Once again, I hate that word, but you know, or trying to improve their farm. I mean, and I mean, Jared and I are always open. We love questions. If somebody's got a better idea, by all means, let's chase after it. And so there's nothing better than a good argument, whether what way's better. And so, I mean, we're always open to suggestions and everything else. And so just we'd love to have people out and see what we're doing and critique it and what we can do better. So
Thank you, Blake. When we get that information, we will push it out as well, so that anyone who wants to participate in that will have the opportunity, or at least know when and where to show up.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good weekend and happy Father's Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Later.